just to finish up my thought before I get into this video, from my last video, the petrodollar now is obsolete, simply for the fact that the United States is the largest consumer economy. If we were not buying things from China or the rest of the world, there would be a massive worldwide recession. Look at how bad the 2008 crisis affected the rest of the world, even though it was a localized event. So our dollar now is just paper. It is not backed up by oil. It is not backed up by gold or anything. It is monopoly funny money. Now let's get into the world's largest banks. The world's largest companies, and these are the world's largest companies, not the US, but the world's, are Bank of America, JP Morgan, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. So let's review who their shareholders are. Bank of America has State Street Corporation, Vanguard Group, BlackRock, FMR, Paulson, remember he worked for the Bush administration, JP Morgan, T. Rowe Capital World Investors, AXA, Bank of New York, Mellon. And Andrew Mellon was the Treasury Secretary for Coolidge and Warren G. Harding. JP Morgan, State Street Corp, Vanguard Group, FMR, BlackRock, T. Rowe, AXA, Capital World Investor, Capital Research, Global Investor, Northern Trust Corp, and Bank of Mellon. Citigroup, State Street Corp, Vanguard Group, BlackRock, Paulson, FMR, Capital World Investor, JP Morgan, Northern Trust Corporation, Fairholme Capital Management, and Bank of New York Mellon. Wells Fargo, Berkshire Hathaway, there's Mr. Buffett right there, FMR, State Street, Vanguard Group, Capital World Investors, BlackRock, Wellington MGMT, AXA, T. Rowe, and Davis Selected Advisors. We can see that there appears to be a nucleus present in all banks. State Street Corporation, Vanguard Group, BlackRock, and FMR Fidelity. So all of those companies, State Street Corporation, Vanguard Group, BlackRock, and FMR Fidelity, own some of the largest stock in all the world's major banks. They also own some of the stock in defense contractors. They own the most stock in Lockheed Martin. And that's where James Comey worked for. I'm telling you, all these people are in bed with one another. Goldman Sachs, the same big four. Wellington Capital World Investors, AXA, they own stock in most banks as well. Massachusetts Financial Service, and T. Rowe, who owns a lot as well. Morgan Stanley, the big four. Mitsubishi, UFJ, Franklin Resources, AXA, T. Rowe, Bank of New York Mellon, E. Jennison Associates, Rowe, Bank of New York, and Jennison Associates. In short, the 8 largest U.S. financial companies are 100% controlled by 10 shareholders, and we have 4 companies present in all decisions: BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and FMR Fidelity. So all that money, the billions of dollars that I talked about in the first video in this series, is owed to these large banks that are controlled by these stockholders, because you'll hear quite a bit. I get things down to their smallest components. I have no inside information. I don't talk to insiders. This is all publicly available information that if you would quit watching football, quit bitching about the Kardashians, and take the time to look at, you yourself could find it out. I just looked at the world's largest companies that happen to be banks. I looked at the banks and their shareholders, and this is as far down as you go. As far as who owns State Street Corporation, Vanguard Group, BlackRock, and FMR Fidelity, they do not publish who owns those groups. But it's my hypothesis that the elite families, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Morgans, the Fords, the Kennedys, families who are part of the Illuminati bloodline, the elite families own stock in those companies. But instead of outright admitting it or outright putting it out there, they have to create subsidiaries like the media does. For instance, if you look at who owns NBC, it's NBC Universal. Who owns NBC Universal? Comcast. Who owns Comcast? Then you find the CEO, Brian L. Roberts. And that's how you find it, but it takes a while. See, that's what they do. They give you subsidiaries under the guise that, oh, these are different companies, but they're all part of the same coin. Now that we got into this, the question is, how do we get out of this? It's not going to be easy. Something that has been happening this long, that is such a catastrophic crisis, is going to be very difficult to get out of. But the way to start would be simple. The Federal Reserve should no longer exist. Now, the way to do this is to get a piece of legislation. Congress, in Article 1 in our Constitution, is supposed to be the legislators. And there's also an amendment in the Constitution that says coin money. And nowhere in our Constitution does it say we could have paper money. It says coin money, gold and silver coin. It's in the Constitution. But it states that. So the Congress, who right now is trying to investigate Trump, they're not really passing many laws at the moment. But what they should be doing is finding a way to have their own private treasury. We have the same sort of system, but the difference is that our government prints the money. Think about it. Every time it prints money, it is getting deeper in debt because it owes interest on the money that it already prints. It's like kicking the can up a hill. You can kick it higher and higher, but eventually it's going to reach the top of the hill and it's going to start snowballing down like a bat out of hell. That's why we've got to attack this problem already. It's already too late, but we could at least start. Like the great Stephen Wright said, the quicker you get behind, the closer you have to catch up. And that is true. So the way to go about it is to start off, the United States government prints its own money. No more Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve is gone. So each time it prints it, it does not owe any money on the debt. And the second thing is we got to start shrinking the size of government. The larger you make the government, the more you have to take out in people's taxes to pay for it. Shrink the size of government. And if you do that, you can begin by issuing your own money, running a budget surplus, and with some of that money that you save, you can begin paying off this debt. Because here's the thing, I'm not a person that likes to just steal money from people and say, fuck you. The way to go about this is to pay back what you borrowed, but not the interest on it. Pay back exactly what you borrowed. So if you go to a bank and you borrow money, you should just pay that money back. And the bank should be state-run. We should have state-run banks. Similar to like we did before the end of the Civil War, where each state has their own currency, and it's all worth the same. But that way you don't have a banking cartel controlling it. But an Ohio dollar is the same as a Tennessee dollar. So if you're from Tennessee and let's say you're traveling to Ohio, you can exchange that currency and then spend it in Ohio money. That way, the bankers will not consolidate power and control over the currency. These are just some ideas. If you have better ideas, feel free to tell me. But the current system we're in right now, where each time you borrow money, each time the government gets money, it has to pay back that debt. And a private group gets to set interest rates. We owe billions of dollars. We got to pay billions of dollars of interest on that. Is not working. So the best thing we can do is try to start fighting this. But if something like that were to happen, the person who passed that legislation and people that support it would be in grave danger. JFK issued Executive Order 111001, which was silver certificates. Money would be backed up by silver. So the government could have legal tender that was backed up by silver. That's one of the reasons. There's many of JFK. There's just a lot of reasons. That dude pissed off all the wrong people. He pissed off the mob, pissed off the CIA, the FBI, Fidel Castro, the Russian. I mean, that dude pissed off everybody. So it's kind of, LBJ had a reason. It's just all the Dulles brothers. They all had reasons for doing what they did. But Kennedy issued a silver certificate, Executive Order 11001, which made our currency temporarily be backed up by silver. As soon as he was assassinated, one of the first things LBJ did was end it. And so that was another reason he pissed off the bankers. But if somebody tries to do something similar, William McKinley tried to implement the 1900 Gold Act. And after that, he was assassinated. And so whoever would issue that would probably be paying with their life, which is the difficult thing to do. But I'm just showing you some ideas, my understanding of history, and throwing some things around. I'm sure there's people that know more about this than me, that have better ideas than me, but at least I'm trying to form ideas instead of just bitching about the system, just complaining. I'm actually trying to look at the intricacies, the details, the history, and actually trying to form a coherent attempt to change it.